Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo, or as many of us Americans say them, Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo. More than likely, you've heard all three of these names before at some point. Maybe they remind you of some powerful attacks used by your favorite red-eyed ninja clan. Maybe they remind you of a classic gaming adventure featuring a white wolf with red markings. Maybe they get you thinking about matchups and builds in your favorite MOBA. Regardless of where you've heard them, do you know where they come from? Who are they, and why are they so heavily referenced? I'm Lorekeeper Wilveren, and that, folks, is what we'll be talking about today. Let's start with the joint origin of the three, then we'll get into each individually. Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo are three of the most prominent deities in the Japanese religion called Shinto. Well, I say deities, but that word doesn't fit perfectly. Shinto teachings focus on entities called kami, which is a term more accurately translated as spiritual entities. Kami is often translated as God, and while that's not wrong, it's not the whole story either. They are revered, respected, feared, and essentially worshipped, and some certainly are godly. But as with many aspects of Asian culture, the word kami is too complex to easily translate to another language. Part of the difficulty in translation comes from the fact that Shinto is very closely intertwined with Japanese culture itself, as opposed to being a practice that exists alongside their culture, the way religion is for us in the West. There is no holy book for Shinto, no sermons to teach followers or bolster their faith, though there are rituals and sacred sites such as shrines where some kami are said to reside. Here you can see some of those rituals being performed. Living alongside the kami of the spirit world is simply part of daily life for Japanese folks. Imagine explaining something pervasive and essential to your entire culture and how you understand the world to an outsider using only a few words. It's kind of hard. But for now, consider kami to be spiritual beings of massively varying power and importance, ranging from the spirit residing in a single small tree, to the watching eyes of your ancestors, to the beings who rule the universe itself. The world of the kami exists parallel to ours, so the kami and humans exist alongside each other, and what happens in one side will always affect the other. Shinto is an optimistic belief system in which no one is perfect and there are almost no absolutes. People are considered to be inherently good, and evil is caused by the influence of evil spirits. The kami themselves have both benevolent and malevolent inclinations and are by no means perfect. This is why rituals and such to preserve the purity and happiness of the kami are so important. You gotta keep the evil spirits away and make sure the kami stay happy and continue to bless and preserve you. And when I say evil spirits, I specifically mean demonic spirits, which are not part of nature. Kami have good and evil attributes, but kami are not inherently evil. So when I say evil spirits, we're not talking about kami. Demons are something different. So, in the beginning, from the formless mists of time, two entities came forth and decided things need to start existing. They were the kami known as Izanagi and Izanami. As husband and wife, they worked together to create the universe. They created many, many kami in the beginning, and I say created because it isn't simply sex and childbirth that creates kami. Many kami were actually created by accident. Now, bear in mind that the kami are not just formless spirits. They are the very thing they represent. So, when Izanami birthed Kagutsuchi, the kami of fire, she was badly burned. From her tears of agony, a few more kami were born before the burns killed her, sending her spirit to Yomi, shadowy land of the dead. In a rage, Izanagi decapitated Kagutsuchi, and from the various parts of his body, several more kami were created. Izanagi went to Yomi, intent on finding his wife and bringing her back. However, when he found her, he was shocked and horrified. Izanami's flesh was rotten and putrid, infested with demons and oni that were being birthed from it. Izanagi fled, which obviously enraged Izanami, and to prevent her from following him, he put a massive boulder in the way, blocking the entrance to Yomi. In Shinto belief, death itself is impure and filthy, and they do everything they can to remain separate from it. Coming into contact with something dead is believed to make one impure, and it's very important to cleanse oneself after and to keep dead things and dead people away from the living. So, Izanagi immediately set about cleansing himself of the impurity of death that he came into contact with in Yomi. When he did, he accidentally birthed 3 more kami because, oops. When he washed his left eye, he created Amaterasu, kami of the sun. When he washed his right, he created Tsukuyomi, kami of the moon. And when he washed his nose, he created Susano'o, kami of storms. He then left these 3 to rule over creation, with Amaterasu being the highest authority, since she was his firstborn. And that's how the three siblings were born, during an act of ritual purification performed by the creator kami, Izanagi. Amaterasu is the highest authority in Shinto belief, kami of the sun and queen of the spirits, and her shining light provides nourishment to all living things. She preserves order and goodness in the world, and her judgment is supreme in matters of justice and law. It's no coincidence that Japan is called the land of the rising sun, and that their greatest and most beloved deity is the kami of the sun itself. It's said that the imperial line of Japan is descended from Amaterasu, who sent her grandson to the physical world to rule it under her guidance. Tsukuyomi, who reflects her radiance but never shined on his own, became her husband and consort after she was appointed to rule. Amaterasu possesses a bright and loving personality and seeks always to preserve purity, nobility, and goodness in all she does and all she oversees. Tsukuyomi does too, but he lacks her sunny disposition, and in fact has been known to be a bit too rigid and strict in his enforcement of proper etiquette. He possesses all the dedication to the proper thing being done in the proper way as his sister, but without her caring, nurturing nature. Susano'o is wild, chaotic, and proud. He often is disheveled in appearance and does not care as much about etiquette and propriety as the others. It wasn't uncommon for disagreements or quarrels to break out between him and his sister specifically in the old times. He is also a fierce warrior with more arrogance than is healthy. Remember, Susanoo is the kami of storms, and his nature reflects it. He's not an evil kami by any means, but he is tumultuous and unpredictable, not the kind of guy you want to bring to a fancy dinner if you can help it. However, he is exactly the kind of guy you want charging with you into battle against a fierce foe. One day, long, long ago, the kami of food, Ukemochi, invited Amaterasu to a great feast. Sadly, her duties kept her too busy to attend, so she sent her consort Tsukuyomi in her place. Ukemochi didn't mind this at all and set about preparing a delicious feast for her guest. But there was a slight problem. See, Ukemochi created the food in a rather disgusting way, coughing and spitting rice, fish, and deer, and pulling fruits and vegetables out from her anus. The food itself was divine, certainly some of the finest food Tsukuyomi would ever have seen. But remember how I said Tsukuyomi was a bit too strict in his enforcement of proper etiquette? He was so disgusted and offended with how the food was created that he refused it. Which probably wouldn't have been so bad if he hadn't immediately drawn his sword and murdered Ukemochi for the offense. This is the irony and duality that the kami of the moon represents. He is so dedicated to proper etiquette, respect, and cleanliness that he will commit atrocities far worse than the original infraction to enforce them, going so far as killing another kami when he was a guest at their feast. When Amaterasu found out, she immediately banished Tsukuyomi from her presence, saying, "Henceforth I shall not meet you face to face." This is why the sun and moon are never seen together in the sky. Tsukuyomi is always trying to chase her and reunite with her, but she will always flee from him. This is also the explanation for why it gets dark during an eclipse. It was believed that it got dark not because the moon covered the sun, but because Amaterasu hid when Tsukuyomi finally got close. Because of all this, Tsukuyomi is generally considered a negative figure in Shinto belief. But he still is worshipped and revered, with many shrines dedicated to him. Personally, Tsukuyomi is actually my favorite deity, but that may just be because I love the moon and Japanese culture, and because my relationship with my relatives is not exactly a good one. Though, to be fair, I didn't kill anyone to earn their ire, so, you know. It's a shame that Tsukuyomi could never find redemption with Amaterasu, but otherwise, perhaps he enjoys the role he has now, watching over the night from the heavens while Amaterasu sleeps, reflecting her light onto the darkened world. He is seen as a negative figure, but not an evil one. Many of us have friends or relatives like that, don't we? Ones who tend to take things just a little too far and don't quite understand that sometimes you need to bend the rules a little or let things slide. Not a bad person, just maybe one who can be a little hard to hang out with since they're so rigid, proud, and stubborn. Now, Susanoo, the wild sibling. As I said, he's always been very chaotic and tumultuous, and more than a little destructive. He often quarreled with his siblings and caused problems on the heavenly plane. Eventually, Daddy Izanagi himself decided he had enough, and he came and banished Susanoo from heaven. Susanoo, for all his faults, was even then a wise and noble being, and he accepted his father's judgment. It's implied he regretted the trouble his chaotic nature had caused, so that's probably why he felt the banishment was justified. Before he left, though, he wanted to say a proper goodbye to his older sister, which Izanagi allowed. He went to visit Amaterasu, but she was suspicious of him and questioned his true motives in coming to visit her. Hurt and offended, Susanoo demanded a challenge be given to prove his sincerity, and Amaterasu gave him one. She would take his sword, and he would take her jeweled necklace, and each would use the other's sacred item to create new kami. If Susanoo's were greater, it would prove he was sincere, but if Amaterasu's were greater, it would prove she was right to mistrust him. Amaterasu created 3 female kami from the sword, while Susanoo created 5 male kami. So Susanoo won, right? Well, not quite. Amaterasu claimed that since her item was used to create them, the 5 male kami were actually hers, and since his sword made the 3 female kami, they were Susanoo's, and by this logic, he had failed the challenge. Was Amaterasu being a bit tricky and petty here? Probably, yeah, but have you met siblings? Again, the kami aren't perfect beings, Amaterasu included. Truth is, though, her suspicion really wasn't warranted. Not at first. Susanoo really had only come to tell her goodbye. But because she was suspicious of him and then tricked him, he got angry. Like, really angry. He destroyed her rice fields, savagely killed one of her horses, and threw the horse's corpse at her sacred loom, shattering it and killing one of her handmaidens. Amaterasu fled in grief and despair to hide in a cave which she blocked with a large stone, and Susanoo was thrown from the heavens. Amaterasu felt not only hurt by Susanoo's rampage, but also felt horribly guilty. If she had not been suspicious of him and tricked him the way she did, he would not have flown into a rage and killed her handmaiden, whom she mourned deeply. Without the sun in the sky, the world was dark and cloudy, and order began to fall to chaos. The other kami tried to convince Amaterasu to come from her cave and return to the sky, but she wouldn't. After a year, a wise kami known as Omoikane decided that they would have to lure her out using curiosity. So the kami threw a great party with plenty of noise and music and dancing. The beautiful Ame no Uzume, kami of the dawn, was instrumental in catching Amaterasu's curiosity as she performed a particularly provocative and revealing dance. As Amaterasu approached the front of the cave to appease her curiosity, she found the sacred mirror called the Yata no Kagami, forged by the kami Ishikoridome, which reflected her own brilliant light back at her and tempted her to continue forward, as was planned. Omoikane drew back the stone blocking the cave's entrance, and Amaterasu emerged, ending the year-long dark winter and restoring light and order to the heavens and the earth. Seeing the state of the world in her absence, she remembered her place in it and why she couldn't let her sadness drive her to hide herself away anymore. She begged forgiveness for all that had happened, and the other kami immediately gave it to her and welcomed her back to her rightful place, all in agreement that Susanoo's actions were way out of line. Speaking of Susanoo, after he was thrown from the heavens, he was found and cared for by an elderly couple who were kami of the earth, and he began to learn a bit of humility. He soon learned that the couple originally had 8 daughters, but a terrible creature known as Yamata no Orochi had killed 7 of them. Yamata no Orochi was an 8-headed serpentine dragon from the ocean, who had been forcing the couple to offer their daughters to it as sacrifices. Susanoo decided he didn't like that, so he came up with a plan to help. In order to keep her safe, he temporarily transformed their last daughter, Kushinada Hime, into a comb and put her in his hair. Then they got a large tub and filled it with sake for the serpent to drink when he came to the house to claim his final sacrifice. The dragon took the bait and drank all the sake, then fell into a deep, drunken sleep. Susanoo struck down Yamata no Orochi in its sleep, but he didn't just kill the beast. He butchered it, cutting off each head and hacking the body into several pieces. In the dragon's tail, he found a sword with the power to control winds, and when he swung it, the grass was sliced at a much greater distance than the blade itself. He decided to name the blade Kusanagi no Tsurugi, which means grass-cutting longsword. The sword's name is often shortened to just Kusanagi. After this, Susanoo married Kushinada Hime and decided it was time to make amends with his sister. He returned to the heavens, and as a sign of his penance, offered Amaterasu the prize he had won from slaying Yamata no Orochi, the magic sword Kusanagi. She accepted, and Susanoo regained the respect and acceptance of the other kami. Satisfied, Izanagi returned and gave Susanoo one final task as a sign of renewed faith. Up until then, Izanagi had been guarding the entrance to Yomi, working to prevent either his wife or the demons she created from escaping, and preventing anyone who wasn't dead from opening the gateway. Izanagi delegated this role as guardian of the gates of Yomi to his redeemed son Susanoo, who accepted it and still protects the entrance to this day. Kami preserve the fool who dares try to open the way between Yomi and the land of the living while the Kami of Storms is on watch. After some time passed, Amaterasu sent her grandson Ninigi to rule the earthly realm. To prove his divine lineage and right to rule, she gave him the sword she had received from her brother, the mirror she found in the cave, and a jeweled necklace she was given by the other Kami when she emerged from the cave, the Yasakani no Magatama. Ninigi managed to start building a kingdom of justice and harmony with the help of what are now called the Three Sacred Treasures, or the Imperial Regalia of Japan. His great-grandson, Jimmu, became the first emperor of Japan, and the imperial bloodline, tracing its roots back to Amaterasu, continues from there. The Three Sacred Treasures are still said to exist and are fiercely protected by Japan to this day, but there's an awful lot of mystery surrounding them, and it's hard to say for sure whether they really are the same three items Amaterasu bequeathed to her grandson. According to legend, a soldier who tried to force open the box containing the mirror Yata no Kagami was struck blind, and at least 2 people who were said to have opened the box containing the Kusanagi died after seeing the weapon. And of course, historical documents suggest that the Kusanagi currently held by Japan may actually be a forgery created to replace the true Kusanagi, which was lost during a war. If you're ever in Japan, why don't you go to one of the shrines where the sacred treasures are said to be secured and ask to see them? I'm sure the guards will be more than happy to tell you absolutely not, because it is strictly forbidden for people to do so. I guess we'll just have to take the Emperor's word on it. So, now when you hear Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, Susanoo, or one of the 3 sacred treasures mentioned in games, anime, or stories, you'll know where the inspiration comes from. By now, you see why these 3 deities are so often referenced in Japanese media, and why the characters named after them tend to be so prominent and important in the stories they appear in. There are also plenty more fascinating stories in Shinto mythology that are worth checking out, not to mention the mythology of other cultures. If there's one you'd like to know more about, and you'd rather someone else do the research for you, leave a comment for me, and maybe I'll make a video on it in the future. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. Until next time, folks.